There was one man whose entire life was a chase for a single, seemingly impossible dream: to stand at the very top of the world of martial arts. Yet, as the years slipped by, a harsh truth settled in his heart. No matter how much time he poured into his training, a lifetime of effort just wasn't going to be enough for him to grasp what he so desperately wanted. But his deep, burning desire wouldn't let him accept this. So, he set his sights on a forgotten myth, a story whispered down through the ages about a celestial dragon. This beast was said to protect a golden fruit, a miraculous treasure that could give eternal life to anyone who dared to eat it. He confronted the divine dragon guardian in a battle that was both ferocious and life-threatening, and after a long struggle, he finally made his way to the hallowed ground where the fabled fruit was supposed to be, his gaze locked on the shimmering fruit. He was sure that with this fruit, he could finally attain the pinnacle of martial prowess he had spent his entire existence dreaming about. Without a second thought, he reached out, plucked the golden fruit, and began to devour it. The very instant he swallowed it, a bizarre and overwhelming energy flooded his entire system. But many decades into the future, Gildragon was now an old man. He lay frail and weak in his bed, his children and his grandchildren gathered all around him. His firstborn son, Gileam, squeezed his father's hand with all his might. Gilus, who was the acting patriarch of the Laragan family, told his son that he didn't want to see any sadness in their eyes, that his moment had just naturally arrived. Gileam managed to crack a smile, but his voice shook as he told his father that the house had already become so somber after their mother had passed away, and it was going to feel so much more empty once he was gone too. But Gilus spoke softly, reminding him that he couldn't let such weakness get the best of him, that he shouldn't let sorrow swallow him whole. Then, a quiet fell over the room, and Gilus's mind drifted back to the golden fruit. He had to concede to himself that, when all was said and done, maybe nobody could really put their faith in the old myths from the ancient days. Even so, he still counted himself as lucky, because he had been granted enough time on this earth to start a family of his own. He looked at his beloved family and told them that he had lived a long and wonderful life. And because of that, he had zero regrets. But he knew, in the deepest part of his soul, that this was not true. Even at this very moment, he still hadn't been able to release his dream. If he just had a little more time, he would have kept on fighting to reach the peak of martial arts, the one goal that had always been just out of his reach. And so, as his life came to a close, he clung to that singular wish right up until his very last breath. But then, in a turn of events that no one could have possibly predicted, Gilus's eyes fluttered open once more. He was completely bewildered, wondering if he had just dozed off for a moment. Nothing felt right. The room he was in was not his own. His body felt incredibly light, and the things he saw around him were totally foreign. When he finally got a good look at his own hands, his eyes shot open in total shock. These can't be my hands. Am I a baby? He didn't take long to figure out that he was in a very strange predicament. But as someone who had reached the level of a 10-star martial artist, he had to wonder how in the world someone could have put him in this state without him ever realizing it. That's when a memory hit him. The divine dragon and the golden fruit. It all clicked into place. The fruit didn't grant immortality. Its true power was reincarnation. It wasn't what he'd expected, but this new understanding filled him with an incredible sense of happiness. He had been given a second shot, another life to finally climb the mountain he had failed to conquer before. For long, he sensed that there were other people in the room with him. As he glanced around, he understood that he was in an annex building of the Laragan Manor. By some miracle, he had been born back into the very same family. He then saw that the room was teeming with other newborn babies. Just as he was trying to figure out why there were so many infants all in one place, a few maids walked in. Baby bottles. They were holding baby bottles. But what was odd was that the bottles were not filled with milk, but with a strange red fluid. Gilfus watched as the maids began pouring the crimson liquid into each of the bottles. He assumed they were getting ready to feed the babies, but then all of a sudden one of the maids brought out a goblin. They shoved the bottle deep into the goblin's throat. Just a few seconds later, the goblin started to shake uncontrollably. A red glow exploded from its body, and then it burst apart in a horrifying spray of blood that went flying all across the room. Gillis was frozen in place, utterly horrified. His mind was a storm of fear and utter confusion. What in the name of the heavens is going on in this place? As they started to give the red liquid to the other babies, a different maid came over and scooped up Gillis. He looked down at the bottle and knew right away that it was not milk. The energy pulsing from it was frighteningly powerful. He could feel that the liquid was dragon blood, and he knew it was way too potent for the delicate body of a newborn baby. But he didn't even have time to think before the maid jammed the bottle into his mouth. On pure instinct, just like any other baby would, he started to drink. In that very instant, a massive wave of power shot through his veins. His tiny body quaked with pain, but Gillis knew this feeling. The blood of ancient dragons was now flowing inside of him. He thought to himself, "This is incredibly risky, but it might also be a golden chance." At first he thought about resisting, but then it dawned on him that if he could somehow absorb all of this power, he could become even stronger than he was in his past life. He might be able to finally reach the true summit of martial arts. With an iron will, he kept drinking the dragon's blood. The veins on his tiny body bulged, and he was racked with terrible pain. But his spirit was not broken. "You shouldn't underestimate me," he thought. "I am Gilfus Elragon." He kept saying those words over and over in his head like a sacred chant, pushing through the agony until against all odds he conquered it. The maid just stared, completely stunned, as he kept on drinking, somehow surviving what should have been a guaranteed death. Inside his small frame, two gigantic dragon energies were crashing into each other, fighting a violent war for control. When one of them finally defeated the other, Gillis was amazed at how simply he had been able to take in all that power. After he had drunk the very last drop, he was in disbelief that he had managed to endure such crushing pain. His body hadn't burst into pieces. In fact, it had adjusted to the power. He saw that a couple of the other babies had also made it through, which made him smile to himself. So, he thought, you should never doubt the will to survive that a newborn has. But as you'd expect from the body of a baby, he was soon completely overcome with exhaustion. His eyelids felt like they were made of lead, and even though he had just won a great victory, Gilfossil Dragon, the most powerful human reborn, slowly faded into a deep sleep. 7 years had gone by, and he was now putting himself through some very difficult physical training. As he was doing push-ups with one hand, a huge boulder was carefully balanced on his feet. When he finally hit his 1,000th repetition, he kicked the boulder high into the air, and as it came hurtling back down, it slammed right onto his back. Gilfus was amazed at the sheer power his body now had. Gillis Laragan, the man who was once the head of the Laragan clan, was now living with a different name. Zeke Dragon. Zeke pondered how he had managed to get so physically strong at such a young age. He knew it was entirely because of the ancient dragon blood that was now coursing through his veins. It was said that every living thing in this world had something inside them known as a source of power. But the ancient dragon blood they had been given as babies was packed with an unbelievable amount of that power. The ones who lived after drinking it ended up with bodies that were much, much stronger than a regular person's. With the divine dragon's source of power now inside him, Zeke was certain he had already gone beyond the limits he had reached at this age in his previous life. And because he was the only baby who had successfully drunk a whole bottle of ancient dragon blood, his body had gone through a massive change, something that even he hadn't seen coming. But even with all the progress he'd made, the thing that bothered him the most was that he was still just a 1-star. He had been training without a break, thinking he would have reached at least 4 stars by this point. The star was how a person's source power was measured. In this world, the human body was often compared to a universe. The more stars a person had floating around in that inner universe, the more powerful they were. But as the number of stars went up, it also got a lot harder to get to the next level. In his past life as Gilfus Elragon, Zeke had done the impossible and reached 10 stars. We find out that he was the illegitimate son of the man who was currently the head of the Laragan family. His mother had passed away when he was just a baby, and even now he had never once laid eyes on his father, which he thought was incredibly irresponsible. The thing that surprised him the most was discovering that a whole 1,000 years had passed since he had been reincarnated. He felt that being reincarnated was already hard enough to believe. But after 1,000 years, the world was a different place. It had truly become a time where only the strongest survived. The clearest evidence of this was the custom of giving infants the blood of ancient dragons, which was then followed by a ceremony called the dragon trial. The children who managed to survive both drinking the dragon blood and passing the dragon trial were thought to be good enough to get an education and be trained as Dragon warriors. All rights, Zeke should have been one of them. And yet, every time he asked the servant who was assigned to look after him why an instructor had never come to train him, the servant would just say that she wasn't permitted to talk about things like that. Even though he had already turned 7, Zeke had not had a single lesson. Isn't that a bit weird? Zeke thought out loud. Every single child who made it through the dragon trial was supposed to start their combat training. Every child but him. He spent day after day living by himself with just a servant there for him. When he finally confronted the servant about it, she just asked him what the problem was with his current living situation. Zeke let out a sigh and said that, for the time being, getting his body into shape was a bigger priority than combat training anyway. After all, he could just teach himself if he really wanted to. He had, at one point, been a 10-star warrior in his old life. Zeke then asked for any information about the other babies who had survived, or anything at all about the main family that might be useful to him, but the servant, once again, said no, telling him that she was not allowed to share that kind of information. A look of frustration washed over Zeke's face. "Are you just never going to answer my questions?" he asked her with a sharp tone. The servant stood her ground and said again that she was not allowed to talk about those things. "Isn't this just cruel?" Zeke asked her with a bit of bitterness in his voice. "To treat me this way." But the servant simply told him that she was just doing what she was told to do, and her job was to take care of Zeke's everyday needs, and that was it. The servant, who was a 3-star level practitioner, could have easily taught Zeke some of the basic fighting moves. And yet, Zeke had zero interest in learning such simple things. After living with this maid for 7 years, he had gotten used to her giving him the same empty answers. In the end, Zeke made up his mind to leave the house and go into the forest. The servant didn't say a word, just stood there and watched as Zeke walked off. "So she's really just going to let me walk out of here?" Zeke thought, a bit of annoyance in his voice. Once he was deep inside the forest, Zeke pulled up some wild poisonous plants from the ground and ate them without a second's pause. Just like before, the taste was awful, but this was a part of his training routine. Then, all of a sudden, he felt something. He took a slow, deep breath and tried to keep himself from reacting. He could feel that someone, or something, was watching him from a distance, keeping an eye on everything he did. No matter what he did, he just couldn't get rid of that feeling. After a little while, Zeke let out a sigh. "They actually followed me all the way out to this place." Huh? When he couldn't take it anymore, he shouted out, "If you have something you want to say, you might as well just show yourself." Then he quickly moved into the tall grass to hide. A few moments later, as he was hiding in the grass, Zeke felt a dark and heavy presence nearby. When he looked in the direction it was coming from, he saw a creature that was known as an anger boar. What is that aura? He wondered. The black fog that was swirling around the animal was something he had never seen in his life, not even 1,000 years ago. As the anger boar was eating the grass, Zeke suddenly jumped up and showed himself, which gave the beast a huge scare. It immediately started charging toward him, but instead of being afraid, a smile spread across Zeke's face. He was actually excited to fight it. The boar came rushing forward, but Zeke dodged it with ease, gathering a golden energy in his fist. With one incredibly strong punch, he created an explosion that ripped right through the anger boar's body. He couldn't stop himself from smiling when he saw it. His attack had been much more powerful than he thought it would be. Even though he was only a 1-star, his strength was greater than most other fighters at his level. As he lifted the dead creature onto his shoulder, Zeke muttered, "This will be even better once I get my star level up." He was getting tired. He was tired of being ignored and kept away from everyone by the Dragon family for 7 years. He started to wonder if it was finally time for him to leave and go on his own journey. At the same time, far away, a man in a cloak was watching him from the dark. "What is going on with that kid?" he said to himself. "He hasn't had any real training, but he's already at the 1-star level, and he just killed that anger boar with one hit. What confused the man even more was how Zeke had been able to sense that he was there. "That boy is not your average kid," he said in a low voice. He remembered that Zeke's mother had died when he was very young, and his father, the man who was now the head of the family, had never shown any concern for him. Without anyone to guide him, the boy shouldn't have been able to get this strong. But since he was the son of the Laragan head, whether he was illegitimate or not, Zeke had to be kept under the clan's watch. That was the reason someone like him had been given the job of keeping an eye on the boy from the shadows. "An illegitimate son, but the blood of the family head is still in his veins," the man whispered. Could that be the reason he's so powerful? He wasn't sure, and he let out a small laugh. That kid is going to be fun to watch as he grows up. Then he vanished back into the shadows. Back at Zeke's house, the boy was gathering his things, getting all set to leave on his trip. But then, out of nowhere, he felt several very strong presences just outside his door. 3 4-star practitioners and 1 5-star. What are they doing all the way out here, he thought, as he crept quietly to the door to try and hear what they were saying. From what he could hear of their conversation, they were talking about how clean and fresh the air was in such a secluded area, and how quiet it was since there were no rifts anywhere nearby. When he heard this, Zeke figured that they couldn't be assassins. They didn't seem like bad people at all. He decided to just go out and talk to them, so he opened his door and asked, "What do you want here?" The group of men froze, completely surprised. Then Zeke saw the symbol that was sewn onto their clothes. It was the mark of the Laragan clan. He mumbled to himself, trying to figure out what they could possibly want with him. The men quickly gave a bow. "It is a great honor to finally meet you, young Master Zeke," their leader said. "We have been sent here to take you to the place where you will be examined." Examination? Zeke's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. A flash of annoyance crossed his face. "They want me to take some kind of test," he grumbled, "even though they haven't taught me a single thing." A few days later, Zeke found it hard to believe that he was back at the main estate of the Laragan family once again. He explained to us that he hadn't been brought back here to start living in the main estate again, but for a different reason. Before he was allowed to go inside, they told him that he had to change out of his dirty clothes first. Zeke then started to talk about something called the Dragon's Nest. In the 1,000 years that had passed, the Laragan family had created a school that was for all the different branches of their family line. Every single person who was born with any kind of connection to the Laragan family had a dream of getting into this place they called the Dragon's Nest to get a proper education as soon as they turned 7 years old. And this very day was the day of the entrance ceremony for that school. Zeke was here to participate in the entrance exam. Even though he had not learned a single thing about the current generation of his family, he was still required to take the exam. Zeke immediately felt his spirits drop when he understood that this was the real reason they had come to get him. Why would they do this now, he thought, right when he had made up his mind to leave and see the world. As he was sitting near the school's entrance, a boy from Ortiscal village came up to him. It was Rangus, and he asked Zeke if he was okay and what seemed to be the matter. When Zeke asked him who he was, the boy properly introduced himself as Rangus and said that he had come over because Zeke seemed like he was troubled. "Is that right?" Zeke answered in a casual tone. After taking a moment to observe the way the energy was flowing in Rangus's body, Zeke quietly thought to himself that the boy seemed a bit timid, but he had a surprisingly strong ability to sense things. Zeke then said he was sorry for his mood and introduced himself as well, admitting that his head was all mixed up because he had no clue what they were going to have to do for the exam. "Is that the only reason?" said Rangus, who started to get a little nervous himself when the test was mentioned. Still, he told Zeke that the yearly entrance exam for the Dragon's Nest didn't usually change very much. But when Zeke confessed that he knew absolutely nothing about the exam, Rangus was completely taken aback. Taking the test without knowing anything about it? Wasn't that just way too careless and risky? Right as Rangus was getting ready to tell him about the details of the exam, a loud and arrogant voice suddenly cut them off. A boy with a big ego shouted and called Rangus a weakling. Rangus spun around, shocked, and knew right away who it was. It was Retin, who was also from Ortiscale village. Making fun of him, Retin asked why he was even there, and said that he must have taken a wrong turn to end up at the Dragon's Nest. He even told him that it would probably be a good idea for him to go back home before he got himself hurt. "I'm here to take the entrance exam," Rangus answered, But his voice was shaking as Retin got closer, asking him if he was really serious about taking the test. Retin grabbed his stomach and started laughing loudly, saying that there was no way he could pass. He then started insulting Rangus's father, saying, "Your dad's a pseudo-dragon, isn't he? What could the son of a pseudo-dragon ever hope to do?" Rangus's hands were shaking as he tried to keep his anger in check, but Zeke saw the whole thing. Then we were told that the Laragan family had a very strict ranking system. The ranks went like this: novice whelp dragons, regular soldier child dragons, captain-level adult dragons, executive elder dragons, who were also called elders, and at the very bottom of the ladder were the pseudo-dragons. These were the people who had either failed to get into or graduate from the dragon's nest, and they were seen as immature and incomplete dragons. But Rangus had held a dream for a long time to show everyone that even if they were called pseudo-dragons, they were still dragons. Zeke was surprised and asked why Retin was so certain that Rangus would fail the exam before it had even begun. "Who in the world do you think you are?" Retin yelled, asking Zeke if he had some kind of problem with him. Zeke spoke calmly and said that he was just curious as to why Retin was so sure that Rangus wouldn't be able to pass. Retin pointed a finger at Rangus and yelled that the reason was plain to see. He was just a total weakling. Zeke tilted his head to the side and asked if he had really just said that Rangus was weak, because from what he could tell, Rangus seemed to be even stronger than them. When he heard that, Rangus's eyes went wide with shock. This was the first time in his life that someone had ever defended him. The arrogant boys got angry and asked if Zeke was actually trying to say that they were weaker than a pseudo-dragon, someone they thought of as being beneath them. But before the situation could get any worse, a man showed up and got everyone's attention. He was the adult dragon examiner, and he announced that the Dragon's Nest entrance exam was just about to start, and that all of the participants needed to go register and get their numbers. As Retin was walking away, he shot a glare at Zeke and warned him that he wouldn't forget his face. Zeke let out a sigh and said that there was no reason to be so angry, and mentioned that the kids of this generation all seemed to have very short fuses. Rangus quickly answered, "That wasn't that strange since they were all about the same age." Rangus also said that anyone would get mad if they were told they were weaker than him. "Is that right?" Zeke said quietly. Since the entrance exam was something they had to do, they didn't have any other option but to take it. But Zeke was surprised when Rangus told him that it was actually possible to not take the test. Zeke's eyes widened, and Rangus saw that Zeke really didn't know anything about it at all. Rangus suggested that it might be a better idea for him to just pull out now before he ended up getting hurt. But Zeke replied with confidence that a genius like him would never back down from a challenge. Rangus could only shake his head and say that Zeke was way too confident for someone who didn't know anything about the exam. Zeke just let out a laugh and said that no matter what the test was, they should get a move on since it was about to begin. Rangus didn't have a choice but to go along with him. When they got to the area where the test was being held, the examiner announced that the exam was very straightforward. To pass, all they had to do was put a scratch on the stones that were placed behind him. But no other weapons were permitted except for the ones that the academy gave them. Still, they were allowed to use their bare hands if they wanted to, but every participant would only get 3 tries. "That's all?" Zeke said, sounding like he wasn't very impressed. After making it through the dragon trial when they were just babies, he had been expecting something much more frightening and difficult, but this just seemed like it was going to be disappointingly easy. The examiner then called up the first participant and told him to start. The boy, who was nervous but had a look of determination on his face, swung his sword at the huge stone with all the power he could muster. The sound of metal hitting rock echoed through the area, ringing in everyone's ears. But to the shock of everyone there, the boy's sword broke right in two, and the force of the impact completely shattered his arm. Zeke was stunned by what he had just seen. As the boy was writhing on the ground in pain, the examiner calmly told him that he still had 2 more chances and asked him if he wanted to keep going. But since the boy wasn't able to stand up anymore, the examiner announced that he had failed and told the others to come clean up the area. As the injured boy was being carried away, the next number was called. Rangus was shaking with fear after what he had just witnessed. At the same time, Zeke was getting annoyed. "So this is what they call a test?" he mumbled. He then asked what kind of stones they were using. It was then explained that the stones had the ability to heal themselves. Any scratch that was made on them would disappear in a flash. Not only that, but they could also send back physical force 100 times stronger when they were hit with power. Zeke immediately said that using materials like that was way too much for a simple entrance exam. But Rangus explained that it was still possible to scratch them if a person could get their source power to flow through their entire body before they attacked. "I get it now," Zeke said. He understood that how you circulated your source power was much more important than your martial arts skills for this particular exam. After looking at the other participants, he figured that only a handful of them would be able to pass, and that included those arrogant boys. As the exam went on, a lot more people failed than passed. Many of them got very badly hurt because of the stone's ability to reflect normal physical attacks. Then, after a little while, the examiner called out Zeke's number. "It's my turn," Zeke said with a calm smile. Ranges, who was still on edge, asked him if he was really sure he didn't want to back out, but Zeke just walked forward, telling him not to be concerned. As he got closer to the examiner, the man's eyes went wide with shock. Zeke's aura started to flare up, and you could faintly see the power from his previous life as Guileless. The examiner told him to come forward and pick a weapon, but Zeke said that he didn't need one. His fists would be all he needed. The crowd started to whisper in disbelief. No matter how good he might be at circulating his source power, they thought there was no way he could scratch that stone with just his bare hands. His fists would definitely be shattered instead. Some of them said that not only his fists, but his arms would be completely destroyed too, which made Rangus incredibly nervous for him. Along with his fear, he also felt angry at himself, thinking that he should have tried to stop Zeke by force to keep him from getting injured. The examiner then gave the signal for him to start. As Zeke walked up to the massive stone, he put his hand on it and noted that this was the first time he had ever laid eyes on this kind of material. He thought to himself that it must have been created sometime in the last 1,000 years. And even now, there were still so many things about this current generation that he didn't quite understand. But that wasn't important anymore. He immediately focused his source power into his fist. While Rangus was shaking with worry about what could happen to Zeke, our main character was actually filled with a sense of excitement, because this was the first time he would be able to use his full power. He decided that he would use this mysterious stone as a way to see just how strong he currently was. Rangus's eyes widened again as Zeke used the first form of the Dragon Destruction combat technique, Burst Strike, on the stone. A massive wave of energy exploded from the point of impact. Pieces of the broken rock went flying in every direction, and the powerful gust of wind from the explosion sent dust and dirt swirling all around. Rangus quickly covered himself to protect himself from the aftermath, while the examiner's eyes went wide with disbelief at what he had just seen. As the dust started to clear, Zeke was standing there with a smile on his face, saying that the technique he had used still felt like it was a bit too much for his current level of strength. Even though his hand was badly injured, he laughed at himself, realizing that he still needed to do a lot more intense training. The other participants were completely silent after what they had just witnessed. Reeton looked both shocked and annoyed that Zeke had managed to destroy the enchanted stone. A woman who was watching commented that Zeke was a very interesting person indeed. While the others were still trying to process what had just happened, Zeke waited happily for the examiner to tell him the results, but the examiner was still in a state of shock. The stone that Zeke had just destroyed was known for being able to regenerate itself, and the only people who were supposed to be able to break it were those who had already gotten to the 4-star level or even higher. And yet, here was a mere child standing in front of him, having done something that should have been impossible. He's just an illegitimate son, the examiner mumbled to himself. And then he wondered if Zeke's power came from the blood of the family head that was still flowing through his veins. He also realized that the technique Zeke had used seemed very familiar to him. The examiner didn't say anything right away, so Zeke called out to him impatiently, asking him what the result was. Finally snapping out of it, the examiner announced that Zeke had passed the test. One of the examiners then came over and gave Zeke a small bottle that had a green liquid inside it. Curious, Zeke asked what it was, but the man just asked him if he could please leave now since Zeke was blocking the way. Annoyed, Zeke frowned and grumbled if everyone in this generation was this impolite. Before he could complain anymore, Rangus came running up to him full of excitement and praised Zeke for his amazing performance. Zeke grinned proudly and said that it was just a piece of cake. Zeke then asked what the liquid was, and Rangus told him that it was a healing potion, the standard kind that the Eldragon family used. Healing potion? Zeke said again. Rangus said that was right, but since Zeke was an illegitimate son of the family, he thought that it might be poison. But since Rangus had said it was okay, he wondered if it could actually be a type of spiritual medicine. The elixir, which was known as cloud-piercing clarity wood, was created from materials that were incredibly hard to find. Herbs that could only be found in hidden realms, along with the pure source power of divine beasts and the essence of very elusive phantom beasts. When someone used it, it could heal not just new wounds, but also old scars and injuries. And on top of all that, it could also make a person's source power stronger. Elixirs like this were almost never seen. After he drank it, Zeke was amazed at how quickly it started to work on his body. "Is this really a spirit medicine?" he asked Rangus. Rangus told him that he didn't know what spirit medicine was, but he was sure that the Laragan family's potions were of a much higher quality than any of the ones you could buy outside of their territory. Rangus then asked if the potion's effect had really surprised Zeke that much. "Of course," Zeke said, and explained that it had healed both his serious injuries and the soreness from his training. Still, he did notice that, unlike spirit medicine, it didn't seem to give his source power a boost. Rangus, on the other hand, said that he was even more amazed by Zeke himself, to which Zeke just laughed and told him not to be silly. Zeke thought to himself that the fact that this potion even existed showed just how much knowledge had grown over the past 1,000 years. Rangus praised Zeke's strength once more. Soon, the examiner announced that Retin had also passed the test, along with his friends. Zeke had expected that to happen, but then Rangus started to tremble nervously when his number was called. Even though he was scared, he gathered up his courage and walked to the front. Watching his stiff and awkward movements, Zeke wondered why Rangus was so nervous, and then he shouted to give him some encouragement, telling him to just believe in himself. Embarrassed, Rangus asked him to keep his voice down. When Rangus picked a sword as his weapon, Zeke watched him very carefully, wondering what he was up to. Once the examiner gave the signal, Rangus attacked the stone, but just as he thought would happen, he failed on his very first try. Determined, he stood up again for another go, but his swing bounced right off the stone, which made him lose his footing and fall down. His hands were shaking from the stone's reflective power. Retin and his friends started laughing, saying that it was just as they had thought. The son of a pseudo-dragon was just a pseudo-dragon himself. They made fun of him, telling him that he should just give up. Retin even sneered at Zeke, asking if this was the same guy he said could pass, and if Rangus was really stronger than them. Zeke was quiet for a moment. Then he told him to stop talking such nonsense. The examiner told Rangus that he only had one try left and asked him if he still wanted to keep going. Rangus couldn't give him an answer. He was overcome with embarrassment and the fact that everyone was making fun of him. He hung his head, but then Zeke walked over to him and asked him what he was doing. He asked Rangus why he was using a sword instead of a spear, why he would pick a weapon that wasn't right for him, and why he would try to take a test without any kind of strategy at all. Retin watched with a mocking expression as Zeke told Rangus that, in his current state, he wouldn't be able to even put a scratch on the stone no matter how many times he tried. Retin and his group laughed again, calling Zeke an idiot and reminded him that Rangus didn't know the first thing about using a spear. His weak father had only ever taught him how to use a sword, they said, and changing weapons at this point wasn't going to make any difference. But Zeke paid no attention to their taunts and called out to the examiner, asking if it was against the rules to switch weapons. The examiner said that it was not. "Then Rangus is in luck," Zeke said with a grin. He turned to Rangus and asked him if he trusted him. Memories of all the times he and his father had been humiliated came flooding back into Rangus's mind. Clenching his teeth, he stood up straight and said that he would trust Zeke. He would fight with a spear, just like Zeke had told him to. Rangus told us that his father had never been able to get into the dragon's nest. Because of that, people had called him a pseudo-dragon and made fun of him. But even with all the humiliation, his father had put up with it all just so he could raise Rangus properly. That was why Rangus had made a promise to himself to show everyone that he, Rangus, the son that his father had raised with so much care, was also a real dragon. He got back on his feet once more, holding the spear tightly in his hands, and announced that today he was going to prove that neither he nor his father were fake dragons. He also knew that if he tried again with a sword, the outcome would just be the same as it was before. So this time, he decided to put his complete trust in Zeke. The only issue was that he had no idea how to use a spear. Zeke called out to him, and as he pointed at the enchanted stone, he told Rangus that there was nothing else he needed to worry about. Just push the spear straight into the stone without thinking about anything else. Just pierce it right through, Zeke said with a firm voice. Rangus tightened his hold on the spear. He knew that in a normal situation, stabbing the stone directly wouldn't do even the slightest bit of damage, especially since it had a powerful regeneration ability. But Zeke was the very first person who had ever stood up for him. Even though they had only just met that day, it was a new and strange feeling for him. But because of that, he decided to put all of his trust in Zeke and to believe in his own power. This time, he gathered his source power into the spear, and right away he noticed something weird. For years, he had been using a sword, and yet, he had never been able to wrap it in this much source energy, something that he was now doing with no effort at all with the spear. With a determined yell, Rangus unleashed all of his power and hit the stone with everything he had. Retin almost died from laughing, saying that it was exactly what he had expected. That changing his weapon wasn't going to help him pass the test. But Rangus didn't give up. He felt something different, something strong. The spear in his hands felt like it was a part of his own body. Then, as he pushed the weapon forward with all of his might, the spear went right through the enchanted stone completely. The look of shock on Retin's face and on the faces of his friends was priceless. Even the examiners couldn't help but be astonished, and they were thrilled by what they had just seen. Rangus hadn't just put a scratch on the stone, he had pierced it all the way through. Zeke immediately gave him praise, while Rangus himself could barely believe what he had just done. Even after the examiner officially said that he had passed, Rangus still asked in disbelief if he had actually succeeded. Zeke smiled, put an arm around his shoulder, and told him that he had. Overcome with happiness, Rangus almost started to cry as he gave Zeke a tight hug, shouting over and over that he had done it, that he had passed the test. Rhett's group, however, did not want to believe it. They said it was just luck, but Retin himself was quiet, shaking with anger. He couldn't accept that. Just as Zeke had said, Rangus was in fact stronger than them, and that his result was much better. The examiner then announced that the test was now officially over. After that, he declared that the entrance ceremony would be starting very soon. Zeke immediately asked if the test was really all over. Rangus said that it looked like it was, but he also said that there would probably be more tests once they were actually inside the dragon's nest. Soon, a group of men came out from a dark hallway. When they came into the light, the examiner announced that the head of the Laragan family would now give a speech to congratulate the ones who had passed. The second Zeke saw the man, he asked who the person with the cold, dark look on his face was. Rangus, who was clearly nervous, said that it was the family head himself. "That's the family head." Zeke said, "Why does he look like that? He's not even smiling. He looks colder than a block of ice." Rangus immediately put his hand over Zeke's mouth, whispering that it would be a good idea for him to just stay quiet, and begged him to please stop talking. Zeke gave a nod. When he looked at the group again, he noted that these people were the ones who held the power in the Laragan family at this time, while others were at the 6-star level. To Zeke, their power was quite impressive, especially since the current family head, Balsa Laragan, was a powerhouse at the 8-star level. 1,000 years ago, only a very small number of people had ever managed to reach that level. Still, Zeke wasn't sure how many people like that existed in this current time. "I do not like this family head," Zeke mumbled. But before he could say anything else, Rangus tried to quiet him down again. Zeke let out a sigh and thought to himself that he never would have thought that this man would be his father in this lifetime. A dark, fiery aura was coming off of Balsa's body, which made the whole area feel heavy. The examiner quickly told everyone to be quiet because Master Balsa was about to give his speech. When Balsa came forward, he only said a few words. They must all work hard to become the flesh and blood of the Laragan family. As he was speaking, the scary pressure of his aura spread out across the hall. Zeke wasn't affected by it, but many of the people who had taken the exam were shaking with fear, and some of them were having trouble breathing as their bodies were frozen by the immense pressure. Zeke saw that even Rangus was being affected by it. He couldn't believe how easily everyone around him was being overwhelmed by the family head's presence. More than that, Zeke could feel an intense hatred that was hidden inside Balsa's aura. He didn't know what the reason for it was, but even so, he just couldn't bring himself to like the man who was supposed to be his father. When Balsa turned to leave, another man stepped forward and got everyone's attention. He had blonde hair, and he cheerfully thanked Balsa for his speech. He then said that Master Balsa had very high hopes for all of them, and that just like his master, he was also going to keep his own speech very short. As Zeke was wondering who this man was, the speaker just told everyone to train hard and to get stronger. That's all. The man smiled and said that people who stress out too much about small things end up going bald early, so he wasn't going to waste their time with long speeches. Zeke couldn't figure out what was wrong with these people, but at least the mood in the hall had gotten a bit lighter. The examiner then announced that the new students would now be told which dormitories they would be staying in. Zeke asked if they weren't all going to be staying in the same dormitory, and Rangus explained that there were 4 of them: West, South, and North dorms. Every student who was accepted into the academy was given a place to live in one of those 4 halls. When Zeke's number was called, he stood up and waved goodbye to Rangus. He was assigned to the East Hall. As he was walking down the hallway, he commented that a lot of things had changed in this place over the last 1,000 years. After he found his room, he said that he must have gotten a bit lost since it had taken him some time to get there, and his roommate had probably already arrived. When he opened the door, he happily greeted his new roommate and said he was sorry for being late. He then said that from this day on, they would be sharing the same room. But to his surprise, his new roommate was none other than Rangus himself. Zeke couldn't help but laugh and said that it seemed like destiny was always bringing them together. He asked if there was anything else they had to do for the day, and Rangus told him that their training was going to start tomorrow. "Is that so?" Zeke said in a casual way, which made Rangus ask if he hadn't been listening to what the examiner had said earlier. Zeke admitted that he had not been listening on purpose. Rangus sighed and said that they should try to get some sleep early since their training was going to start the next day. As Zeke was looking out the window, he thought about his plan to run away from the Elragan family and travel the world. But after what he had learned about the enchanted stone with the ability to heal itself and the healing potion, he realized that he had found out a lot of interesting things during the exam. If he really wanted to know about all the changes that had happened over the last 1,000 years, he thought, then maybe staying with the Elragan family for a little while wouldn't be such a bad idea after all. A month had gone by at the academy, and their training was getting tougher and tougher. They were holding heavy dumbbells in both of their hands. The instructor explained that the dragon's breath that he was teaching them was one of the most important techniques that had ever been created by the 15th Aragan family head. After he reminded them that they had to master the technique no matter what the situation was, the instructor's attention was caught by a few of the students. Some of them, he saw, had already mastered dragon's breath, especially the young woman that he called Master Leah. The amount of energy that was overflowing from her suggested that she was very close to reaching the 2-star level. But aside from her, there was one other student who caught his eye, and he could hardly believe what he was seeing. Zeke was training while not only holding the dumbbells, but he was also balancing large stones on his head and his arms. The instructor stared in disbelief and said to himself that the blood of the family head really did run in Zeke's veins. However, it was said that no one had ever taught Zeke a single thing since he was a child, which was why everything he was seeing now felt so strange to him. Zeke, on the other hand, couldn't believe that the technique that he had once called the Dragon King's breathing technique had been improved upon by the family heads who came after him, and that it was now being taught to the other branches of the family as well. According to Zeke, breathing techniques were ways to gather the source power from the area around you into your body. Once that source power was circulated, it would make a person's own inner energy stronger. How well these techniques worked depended on a person's own ability and intelligence. That was why the great families of this world kept their techniques a secret and never allowed them to be learned by people who were not from their family or who were not part of their bloodline. Zeke also realized that the dragon's breath was a safe and simple technique, and it was easy enough to master, but it was no use to him if it could only be used when he was resting. His own version of the breathing technique allowed him to control the source power around him even when he was moving. Because of that, it was much more complicated and powerful in a real, but it was also a lot harder to learn. Only a very few people had ever been able to master it. He figured that the current generation must have made his original version simpler so that even the members of the family's branch families could learn it. And that decision had definitely helped to make the Eldragon family stronger. Zeke couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. He had never thought that the techniques he had discovered so long ago would still be making an impact after 1,000 years. Laika, in the meantime, was quietly watching Zeke from a distance. Later on in the cafeteria, the other students were amazed by the amount of food that Zeke was eating. As he kept on scarfing down his meal, he noticed that Rangus was sitting quietly across from him. "What's the matter?" Zeke asked. "You're not going to get strong if you don't eat." Rangus just asked if Zeke didn't think his stamina was a bit strange. "That's it," Zeke replied. "You just need to eat more if you want to get stronger. Train harder. Push yourself." He even offered some of his food to Rangus, but Rangus politely said no, saying that he had already had enough. As Zeke was thinking about how some of the students were already very well trained even before they had come to the academy, a girl suddenly came up to them. "You're quite impressive," Laika said, and her voice was calm, but also full of confidence. Zeke blinked. "And who are you supposed to be?" he asked in a casual way. Rangus immediately started choking on his food and whispered nervously, "You don't know who she is?" "That's Master Leah, the daughter of the family head Lord Balza," Zeke said, not seeming to care at all. "What do you want me to do about that?" "I don't know her." Rangus started to sweat a lot. "You can't talk to her like that. Master Leah is one of the people who could become the next family head. She's not someone you can just talk to in a casual way." "Is that so?" Zeke replied. "Well, I'm a family head's child too. An illegitimate one, though." Rangus froze in shock while Laika looked at him with a curious expression. "Is that true?" she asked. "Are you really the family head's illegitimate son?" "Why would I lie about that?" Zeke said, and he shrugged. Laika frowned a little bit. "Then tell me, how could an illegitimate child like you have destroyed the magic stone with just your bare hands? How could someone who is not from a well-known family have so much strength?" "Because I'm Zeke," he replied with confidence, and he turned back to Rangus. "Stop staring and finish your food." Both Leah and Rangus were quiet for a moment. Then Leah suddenly smiled. "You really are an interesting person," she said, and then she sat down next to him. "How about you serve under me? I'll make you one of my followers." Zeke raised an eyebrow. "What exactly are you trying to say?" "I want you to join me," she said. "Be my ally and I'll be your backer. Every illegitimate child needs to have allies and influence, don't they? Use your strength to help me become the next family head. And once I do that, I'll help you get your own dreams." Zeke didn't even have to think about it. "No," he said in a flat voice. Laika frowned again. "Why not? Don't tell me you want to become the family head yourself." As her aura flared up with a faint crackling energy, Zeke could tell that she was close to reaching the 2-star level. For someone her age to be able to release an aura like that, she was indeed very impressive. Still, Zeke stayed calm. "You can think and do whatever you want," he said, "but I have no interest in being the family head or in having any kind of title." "Why?" Leah asked in a cold voice. Zeke stabbed his knife into the table. "Because I don't need to serve anyone," he said, and his voice was steady, but sharp. "I'm the strongest person there is." The cafeteria became completely silent. Even Leah couldn't believe what she was feeling. Zeke's presence had completely overwhelmed her for a moment. Rangus immediately stepped in to try and calm the situation down, telling both of them to just relax. But Laika wasn't the kind of person to just back down, and she was embarrassed and angry about what had just happened. She decided to challenge Zeke to a duel. Zeke, however, didn't seem to care at all and just kept on eating. A little while later, a buzz of excitement spread all across the campus. "Where are they going?" one student asked. "To the training grounds." Another one answered, "There's going to be a duel between the younger generation. Master Laika herself is going to be fighting." "Master Leah from the Typhon family?" someone exclaimed. "Who would be brave enough to challenge her?" When they got to the training grounds, everyone was whispering to each other, trying to figure out who was going to be facing her. Zeke, meanwhile, couldn't believe that Laika was actually serious about this duel. "Are you all right with this?" Rangus asked nervously. "You're going to be fighting Master Leah. Even if you call her master, I don't know who she is," Zeke replied in a blunt way. Rangus sighed. "You should at least show her some respect." Still, Rangus tried to explain. "What's important right now is that you understand who you're going up against. Master Leah isn't just anybody. She's the daughter of Lord Balza Laragan, and she also has the blood of the Typhon family. which is one of the 4 great families that support the Awakens. She's a prodigy who was able to master all the forms of the Typhina family's hereditary lightning great sword technique when she was still very young. Like her father's other children, she has a terrifying amount of talent. Zeke tilted his head. I didn't understand a single word of that except for the part about her being the family head's daughter. Angus just stared at him. How do you not know any of this stuff? Because I don't, Zeke said plainly. So don't ask me. Rangus blinked as Zeke suddenly let out a laugh. But since I don't know anything about her, he said with a grin, that'll just make the fight more fun. Sounds exciting. Rangus could only sigh in and worry. No matter how strong Zeke was, Master Leah was on a completely different level. Why did you even agree to her challenge? He asked. I never run away from a fight, Zeke answered. And it looks like my challenger is ready anyway. At that moment, Laika was standing with her sword stuck firmly in the ground, and her aura was flaring, with lightning faintly crackling around her. Are you two done talking? She asked in a cold voice. Laika shouted, asking if they were finally done talking, and Zeke said that he was ready. Ranges, who was shaking with fear and shock, immediately ran away from them, warning Zeke to be careful in their fight. Zeke then turned to Laika and asked her why she was so set on fighting him. Leah explained that she wanted to become the next family head of the Awakens family, and to do that, she needed to beat Zeke and make him one of her followers. What do you mean by that? Zeke asked, wondering what he had to do with her dream of becoming the family head. Laika asked him back, asking if he really had no idea about the current state of their family, and if being an illegitimate child was the reason he was so out of the loop. Zeke simply said that he didn't. He admitted that what he knew about their family was very limited. Because of that, Laika started to explain. She said that, including the 2 of them, there were 5 people who were candidates to become the next family head. Except for Zeke, all of her siblings were connected to the 4 major branch families of the Awakens clan. The position of family head was so important that it had become a cause of conflict among those branches. For that reason, all of Zeke's siblings had entered the Dragon's Nest to study and to represent their own families. Since the fight for the succession had turned into a very intense competition, Laika needed to have strong allies to be able to stand up against her older brothers. Zeke quickly understood that this was a power struggle between the 4 main branches of the Awakens family. He thought it was all way too complicated and wasn't even sure if he wanted to understand it. Laika then went on, saying that as one of the candidates for family head, she needed to make not only her knowledge and power stronger, but also her influence by gathering strong followers. Without saying another word, she charged right at Zeke, declaring that she was going to beat him right then and there to make him one of her subordinates. But Zeke easily dodged her powerful strike as well as the series of attacks that came after it. Still, Laika refused to let him get away. The people who were watching couldn't believe what they were seeing. The speed of their movements was incredible. Laika's attacks, even with her heavy greatsword, were so smooth and fast that it looked almost like it was no effort at all. As they watched the battle between the siblings, the crowd started to whisper about Laika's precise control over her source power, and they noted how her strikes were getting faster and stronger as time went on. They could only be in awe of the power of a true daughter of the family head from one of the main branches. Some of them even said that the outcome of the fight was already clear. What they didn't know, however, was that Laika herself was getting more and more frustrated. She couldn't understand how Zeke kept dodging every single one of her attacks, or why it felt like he was just playing around with her. Ranges, who was watching from a distance, couldn't help but be amazed. His earlier worries were disappearing as he saw how calm Zeke's movements were. Zeke then said that the martial arts Lee was using were not like anything he had ever seen before. He admitted that her movements were much faster than those of any normal 1-star level fighter. But Leah, who was irritated, shouted for him to stop talking and to focus on their fight. Zeke clenched his fist and said that he was already focused, and that was exactly why he could unleash such a powerful strike so easily. His punch landed squarely, and Laika immediately gagged from the force of it. She fell to her knees, holding her sword and her stomach in pain. The spectators gasped and started whispering to each other, wondering how Zeke had managed to avoid all of Laika's attacks and who this mysterious boy really was. As Laika struggled to get back on her feet, she asked why none of her strikes could hit him. Compared to other 1-star fighters, she knew she was much faster. So, logically, Zeke shouldn't have been able to keep up with her. Zeke admitted that she was indeed faster than any one-star he had ever seen before. But in his eyes, she was still just a one-star. "You're a one-star too," Laika snapped, saying that Zeke shouldn't be able to match her speed and movements. "There's a simple reason for that," Zeke replied. "Your breathing, the movement of your eyes, even the way your muscles shift. I can read them all. By watching these small details, I can predict your next move. It's all based on experience." "Don't make me laugh," Laika shouted, and she launched another fast strike at him. But Zeke easily dodged it again, saying that just like he had said a moment ago, he could see and read her every move. In the next moment, he countered with another powerful attack that sent Laika crashing into the wall with a violent force. The spectators screamed in shock, asking if Laika had really been defeated. "Master Zeke, that was amazing. You beat Master Leah," Rangus shouted in excitement. But Zeke calmly said that it wasn't over yet. Their fight wasn't finished. As the dust cleared, Laika stood up once again, bruised, but she was not defeated. Zeke noted that she had focused her source power into her core, which allowed her to take his attack without getting seriously hurt. He smiled slightly and admitted that Laika was truly an extraordinary girl. "That's enough, Master Leah," Rangus pleaded, but Zeke told him to move back, warning him that he could get caught in their next exchange. Zeke then noticed a very strong surge of aura coming from Laika. He wondered if she had just moved up to the 2-star level. The spectators saw it too. They couldn't be mistaken. The glowing mark on her body was proof that she had indeed become a 2-star with a white aura. The 2-star level was a stage where a person could channel their source power into their martial arts and even make it appear outside of their body. Laika thanked Zeke, saying that because of him, she had reached the 2-star level earlier than she had expected. But because of that, she declared, "You no longer have any chance of winning." With her aura blazing, she charged at Zeke, her great sword surrounded by a radiant power. Zeke only laughed. He looked genuinely thrilled. "You've really improved," he said with excitement, and he dodged another quick strike. "Your speed is incredible now." But his expression suddenly changed when he felt a sting on his cheek. A shallow cut. "I know I dodged that attack," Zeke thought to himself. Laika smirked and asked if he could finally see the difference in their strength. "This is my true ability," she said proudly. "Now that I've become a full 2-star and have gotten my aura, I'll show you the real power of the truth under greatsword technique." "Oh, then I get to see a martial art I've never seen before," Zeke said, smiling in excitement. To him, this was turning out to be the most thrilling and enjoyable moment of their fight. Laika suddenly used the lightning greatsword technique. Lightning flash, her sword crackling with a blinding golden energy as she charged forward. Zeke was instantly surrounded by a storm of lightning, which forced him to take a step back as he shouted, "Wait a second, what kind of technique was that? How can you control lightning like that? Isn't this a bit too much for a sparring match?" Laika smirked, and she drove her sword into the ground as a golden light surged around her. "You seem surprised," she said calmly, and she summoned another move. Lightning net. Sparks shot up from the ground, forming a glowing web of electricity that went flying towards Zeke, but he just barely dodged it. As he landed, he muttered to himself, "Her power has grown so much. Her strength now is nothing like it was before. At this rate, this fight is not going to be easy." The audience was whispering in awe, and they couldn't hide their astonishment. Ever since Leah had moved up to the 2-star level, the whole battle had completely changed. Rangus, who had been watching anxiously, started to worry. Zeke noticed that Laika's movements were simple. There was nothing new compared to when she was a 1-star. But every time she swung her blade now, it carried a much greater force. Her lightning greatsword technique was overflowing with power. Her aura was making each strike even stronger. What surprised Zeke even more was the speed. Laika was moving faster than he could have ever imagined, and her lightning felt strangely mysterious. Still, he was confident. Even if she could cover herself in thunder, he was sure he could counter it, and yet, he was filled with curiosity. What kind of power was this? What kind of lightning could she control? While he was dodging her continuous attacks, he studied her every move, analyzing her aura and its rhythm. Laika, noticing Zeke's calm smile as he danced away from her attacks, frowned, still smiling. "You look too relaxed for someone who is in a duel," she sneered. Let's see how long that lasts. She dashed forward once more, her sword blazing with light as she used swift thunder, surrounding herself in golden lightning. But again, Zeke dodged at the very last second. She's as fast as lightning itself, he thought, only for Laika to swing her sword in the middle of her charge. The blow hit him this time, sending Zeke flying backward with a powerful shockwave that scattered dust and debris all over the field. Ranges gasped and rushed towards Zeke out of pure panic, but one of the other spectators grabbed his arm to stop him. Meanwhile, Zeke stood up. His clothes were singed, but his will was not broken. Laika charged again, and she unleashed another lightning flash, hitting him head-on. And yet Zeke still stood tall after it. How is he still standing? Laika muttered, and her brow was furrowed in disbelief. Rangus ran toward them, shouting, "Master Laika, stop! That's enough. We've already seen your strength." But Laika snapped back coldly. "Do you not understand? Rangus, stopping in the middle of a battle would be an insult to Zeke." Desperate, Rangus turned to Zeke and begged, "Please, Master Zeke, surrender. That's enough." Laika chuckled. "He's right. Looking at your conditions, surrendering would be a wise move. If you kneel down and promise to be loyal to me, I'll stop." But Zeke only smiled silently. Leah's eyes hardened. "Even as an illegitimate child, you're truly a proud Elragon," she said with a little bit of mockery in her voice. She raised her great sword high, and her aura surged. "If that's what you want, then I'll use my full strength to end this." Lightning roared from the heavens as Laika summoned her first secret art, Evan's Thunder. A huge surge of golden energy came down, shattering the stones under Zeke's feet. Thunderbolts struck his body in a storm of divine fury. Rangus cried out in terror, watching his friend's body get engulfed by golden lightning with smoke rising from his charred form. Laika drove her sword into the ground, let out a deep breath, and said softly, "I'm sorry, Zeke, but this is the end." But then, a voice echoed through the crackling air. "Is that so?" In an instant, a brilliant golden lightning aura exploded up toward the sky. Laika's eyes went wide with shock as she turned around. "Impossible! How can this be? How do you have a lightning aura?" she stuttered. Zeke stood there, smiling calmly as golden arcs of electricity danced across his skin. "So this is what you call a lightning aura?" he said in a casual way. His tone was calm, but his words sent a ripple of shock through the crowd. "Possible," Laika whispered, unable to believe what she was seeing. Zeke smirked. "The truth is, I let you hit me on purpose. I wanted to study your lightning, how it flows, how it behaves, and somehow, I learned to use it myself." "That's absurd," Laika snapped inwardly. Zeke explained to himself that he had purposefully taken Laika's attacks because her lightning had fascinated him. While he was enduring her strikes, he was constantly using his Dragon King's breath technique. The strange resonance between his breathing and her lightning caused a golden energy to gather in his body. Before he even realized it, he was able to control the lightning himself. Maybe Laika has a unique constitution, he thought. And judging from her family's great sword technique, it's likely that their whole bloodline shares this lightning affinity. Zeke walked toward her with confidence. "I never expected lightning-type source power to be this incredible. This duel turned out to be the perfect training." With a grin, he added, "Thanks to you, Leah, I've reached the 2-star level myself." Golden lightning flared up around him as he declared, "Our battle isn't over yet." Laika roared and charged again, her great sword glowing with power, and she unleashed another blinding attack. But Zeke sidestepped it effortlessly and got ready for a counter-strike. However, as he moved, he suddenly vanished in a flash and reappeared on the opposite side of the arena. "What just happened?" he muttered. He then realized, when you gain a huge amount of source power, it strengthens your body's muscles and nerves. This new lightning aura must have changed my physiology. I can't fully control my speed yet. In the stands, Rangus was speechless. He couldn't follow their movements anymore. Both of the fighters were just blurs of golden light and thunder. Am I just imagining things? Or has Laika not landed a single hit lately? He wondered. Frustrated, Laika shouted, "Are you making fun of me, Zeke?" "I'm not," Zeke replied calmly. "But I will admit that you're a real threat." He then lunged forward, delivering a powerful kick, but Laika blocked it with her sword, and the force of it pushed her backward. Zeke straightened up, smirking. I think it's time to end this. End this? Leah repeated, narrowing her eyes. Yes, Zeke replied. I've been thinking about creating a new technique for a while now, and this seems like the perfect time to do it. Creating a new technique? She said in disbelief. Zeke nodded. Exactly. He paused for a moment, then murmured. Should I call it a first form or maybe a special form? Leah blinked, confused. Did he even get any proper combat training? From which family could he have learned that? She wondered, and her thoughts were spinning. Before she could even react, Zeke appeared right next to her in a flash. Lightning was surging in his hand. Dragon Destruction Combat Arts Special Form, Lightning Peak, he shouted. The attack hit her directly, wrapping her in a fierce storm of golden thunder. Her body trembled violently, and her sword slipped from her grasp as she fell to her knees in front of him, with electricity still crackling around her. The arena fell silent. Rangus and the others just stared in disbelief. Zeke had won. Leah, who was lying on the ground, exhaled shakily. After a few moments, she forced herself to sit up, trembling. I can't believe I lost. I was supposed to become the next family head. I can't lose. Not to anyone, she thought bitterly. Zeke walked up to her, offering his hand. You were amazing, Laika. Truly strong, he said sincerely. It's always exciting to learn something new. This fight was worth it. Smiling warmly, he added. It'd be boring if this was the last time we fought. Let's have another sparring match sometime. Laika froze, and her cheeks turned red as she stared at his outstretched hand. Despite her defeat, she had a faint look of happiness on her face. Perhaps it was out of pride. Or perhaps for the first time, it was admiration. Once again, Zeke said that they should have another sparring match soon. With a confident smile, he added that he couldn't wait for their next fight. Laika, though she was a little shy, reached out her hand toward him, and she admitted that she was no match for him and that she willingly accepted her defeat. Several hours later, deep inside a dimensional rift, Bala Elragon, the father of Leah and Zeke, and the current head of the Eldragon family, was standing surrounded by countless strange and feral monsters. As the creatures charged toward him, Balsa's eyes began to glow with an intense light, and he released a crushing wave of aura and dragon pressure. He instantly froze every single creature in place, and he drew his sword. Balsa invoked the first form genesis of the Dragon Destruction Combat Arts. With a single fluid swing, all the monsters around him were cleanly cut in half. As he sheathed his sword, the Laragan family soldiers rushed forward to finish off any remaining monsters that might have survived their master's strike. Balsa turned toward the exit of the rift, but before he could leave, one of the soldiers called out to him, saying that he had an important report. Balsa stopped walking and asked what it was about. The soldier informed him that Lady Laika had reached the 2-star level. Upon hearing this, Balsa froze in mid-step. His glowing eyes flickered, and his response came out cold and detached. So what of it? The soldier, who was clearly nervous, explained that reaching the 2-star level at only 7 years old was an extraordinary achievement. He added that with Laika's talent, once she graduated from Dragon's Nest, she would likely reach the 4-star level or perhaps even the 5-star level. Balsa's reply was chilling. Talent means nothing. The next time you report to me, I expect to hear how she can be of use to us. If all you bring are worthless updates like this, you'd better leave my sight. The soldier fell silent as Balsa continued toward the rift's exit. But before he could step through, the soldier quickly added that Laika had recently lost in a sparring match. Balsa stopped abruptly and turned his head slightly, and his expression was unreadable. Did she lose to one of her brothers? He asked. The soldier shook his head. No, master. She was defeated by someone her own age, by Lord Zeke. Zeke, Balsa repeated, and his voice was low. The son of that woman. Memories came to the surface of a humble maid, Zeke's mother. That woman truly was gifted in battle, he muttered. But she died after giving birth to the boy. He turned fully to face the soldier. His tone was sharp. Tell me who could have possibly trained Zeke to defeat a 2-star cultivator? The soldier hesitated before answering. No one, master. Lord Zeke has never received any formal training. He defeated Lady Leah through his own strength and skill alone. In fact, he too has already reached the 2-star level. I see. Balsa said flatly. Then, turning his back once more, he declared, "Begin the first trial." The soldier was visibly startled. "Master Balsa, forgive my intrusion, but isn't it too soon for the first trial? It's only been a month since the students began their combat training. Most of them haven't even reached the 1-star level yet." Balsa cut him off. "I do not care. Death chooses no timing, no level, no favorites. Only the strong deserve to survive. Those who fail aren't worthy of the Laragan name." "Yes, master," the soldier replied quickly. But then Balsa added, "Also, summon Freya. Tell her to return immediately." The soldier's eyes widened in disbelief. "Freya? Master, do you mean that Freya?" Balsa nodded. "Indeed, if Zeke could defeat Laika using only his own strength, then he's far more intriguing than I expected. I want Freya to design and supervise the first trial herself." The soldier bowed deeply. A rare, almost warm expression flickered across his face as he said softly, "He's the most interesting one of all." The next day at Dragon's Nest, the students continued their combat training under Rangus. Zeke, however, was off to the side practicing his breathing technique. Sitting in a wall-sit position, he balanced a massive boulder on his head while holding dumbbells in both hands. His unwavering focus drew the attention of Rangjis and the others, who couldn't help but watch him in silence. With his eyes closed, Zeke contemplated the technique they were studying, the Strike Dragon combat arts. As he recalled, this technique was originally created by the 15th family head. Though it was labeled as a combat art, it was in truth a body enhancement method. Simple yet well constructed, it allowed even young cultivators to grasp it. Ranges called out, "Zeke, aren't you going to train?" Zeke opened one eye. "What do you mean?" "I mean combat training," Rangus clarified. "We're practicing the Strike Dragon combat arts." "I already learned that," Zeke replied casually. Rangus was stunned. "What? But it was only taught to us this morning. How could you have mastered it already? But what's more important right now is that your source power is flowing incorrectly." "My what?" Rangus asked, confused. Zeke set down the heavy boulder from his head and told Rangus to turn around. Placing his hand on Rangus's back, Zeke channeled his aura through Rangus's body, correcting the flow of energy. "There," he said. "That's how your aura should circulate." Rangus turned to face him, grateful. "You've really mastered the Strike Dragon combat arts, haven't you?" "That's incredible." Zeke frowned playfully. "Are you doubting me? What kind of friend are you?" "No, not at all," Rangus quickly said. "It's just, aside from my father, no one's ever taught me like that before. That's why I want to learn everything I can. You, Lord Zeke, already have your own martial arts, strong enough to defeat Lady Leah. I just thought the Strike Dragon combat arts might be too simple and boring for someone like you." "It's not boring," Zeke replied. "Actually, I admire its stability. It reminds me of my own Dragon Destruction combat arts. Though my children never liked that technique. They said it was too difficult and complicated. The Dragon Destruction combat arts was indeed a complex and demanding technique, but it possessed immense power. It consisted of 4 main forms, and during his battle with Laika, Zeke had created a 5th. Beyond that, there was even a secret. He wondered silently how his descendants had handled his other dragon techniques over time. Perhaps they had modified them. The thought only made him more excited. "Anyway," he said, "since I've already mastered the Strike Dragon combat arts, I'll continue with my physical training." He smiled faintly. Everyone has their own way of learning techniques. But before he could continue, Rangus suddenly shouted his name. "Zeke, please teach me. I know it's a shameless request, but I want to get stronger, even just a little." Zeke looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll teach you." Rangus blinked in surprise. "Wait, you mean it? You'll really teach me?" "Of course," Zeke replied. "Why do you look so surprised? You were the one who asked. I just didn't think you'd agree so easily." "I'm not lying," Zeke said, "and I know you're worth teaching." Just then, Leah approached them. Though she was hesitant, she spoke up. "I'd like you to teach me too." Rangus turned to her, startled. "You too, Lady Leah? Is there a problem?" she asked calmly. "Honestly, I used to think that no one my age could defeat me. As a candidate to become the next head of the Eldragon family, I was confident in my power. But yesterday's match, it shattered my pride. I still don't know how you managed to use lightning aura or how you wield it even better than I do, Zeke sighed. So now this is my fault, he muttered half-jokingly, determined. Laika continued. I want to become stronger. Strong enough to defeat our older brothers and you as well, Zeke. Please teach me. Zeke fell silent for a moment. He was deep in thought since Zeke didn't answer right away. Leah asked if he was really fine with it. Even though he was also a candidate to become the next head of the Elragan family, Rangus agreed with her, realizing that even though Zeke was an illegitimate child, Balsa Elragon was still his father, which technically made Zeke one of the successors whether he liked it or not. Zeke calmly replied that he didn't mind, but the real question was whether Laika's body was in good condition to train, saying that from what he saw in their match her injuries would normally take at least a month to heal. Laika shook her head and said she had already used a healing potion, so there was no need for him to worry. Zeke and Rangus exchanged a look, whispering to each other. Zeke asked if that medicine truly had such absurd effectiveness, but Rangus replied that if Zeke was referring to the basic potion given during the entrance exam, it definitely wasn't strong enough to heal Laika's wounds so quickly. Because she was the daughter of the family head, she must have used a much stronger kind of potion. Zeke sighed in amazement, muttering that this era truly was something else. Laika nodded, admitting that without the potion she would have been bedridden for at least a month. But now what mattered most was her request, whether Zeke would agree to train her as well. She knew that he too needed to train, but she wanted to grow stronger under his guidance. Zeke agreed without hesitation, saying that he never turned down young people with ambition. Both Leah and Rangus were surprised by his answer. Leah pointed out that he was also young like them, while Rangus added that they were about the same age. Zeke chuckled and agreed. Then, with a teasing tone, Zeke asked if she was truly sure about having him as her instructor. After all, he was the one who defeated her. Laika replied firmly that she didn't care about that. She didn't have the luxury to be picky if she wanted to become the next head of the Elragan family. She had to become stronger no matter what it took. Zeke remembered how during their first encounter, she had mentioned her dream of becoming family head. He asked why she seemed so obsessed with that goal. Without hesitation, Laika answered that if she failed to become family head, she would only be used for a political marriage. She spoke bitterly, saying that in the best-case scenario she'd probably be forced to marry one of her cousins. But the worst case would be marrying a man she didn't even know. Zeke's expression darkened, and anger flickered in his eyes as he asked what she meant by that. Laika said it was natural, considering how valuable the Elragan bloodline was, especially within the 4 branches of the family. Their source power was special. It could be used in countless ways. That's why the family was obsessed with keeping their bloodline pure. Rangus shuddered, sensing the terrifying aura that suddenly emanated from Zeke. His voice turned cold and sharp as he said that the Elragan family had truly begun doing disgusting things like this. He clenched his fists, saying he would destroy such filthy and meaningless traditions. But before the atmosphere could grow heavier, several instructors arrived, immediately drawing everyone's attention. Laika blinked in surprise, wondering why they had come, while Zeke muttered that the timing couldn't be worse. He worried that they might have overheard what he just said. Then, from behind them, a woman with fiery red hair appeared. One instructor stepped forward and announced that starting today, they would have a new instructor. Despite how busy this person was, she had taken the time to teach them personally, so they should be grateful. As the red-haired woman approached, she reached out her hand toward Laika and asked if she was Lady Leah. Feeling a wave of danger, Leah instinctively leaped backward. Zeke stepped forward protectively while Rangus grabbed onto his arm in fear. The red-haired woman smiled faintly, praising Laika's sharp reaction and saying her aura quality wasn't bad at all. Zeke frowned slightly. He hadn't even sensed her presence until now. Rangus nervously asked who she was. The instructor then introduced her as Lady Freya. Freya Fuick of the Black Dragon Corps. Freya gave a polite smile and greeted everyone, saying she was pleased to meet them all. She then looked straight at Zeke and asked if he was Lord Zeke. When he confirmed it, she asked if he wasn't surprised by her sudden appearance. Zeke replied calmly that nothing she did was surprising. Freya froze for a moment as Zeke's eyes began to glow faintly, and he commented that her stealth technique was rather interesting. Freya quickly realized why even the family head, Bloodline, was interested in this boy. Meanwhile, Zeke analyzed her movements. He noticed her source power was concentrated in her lower body, following a flow pattern he had never seen before. That must be why her footsteps made no sound at all. A spark of excitement lit up his eyes as he wondered what kind of martial art she used. Freya then took command of the class. She confirmed that she would be their new instructor. The students began whispering among themselves in disbelief. Lady Freya, the Tempest Wind, was known as one of the strongest warriors in the family. The other instructor confirmed that Freya was a 6-star practitioner under the Black Dragon Corps, the elite unit serving directly under the family head himself. The students were in awe, unable to understand why someone of her rank would come teach at their academy. Freya smiled faintly and said she would indeed train them, but under one condition. They had to pass a simple test. The students gasped at her words. She told them not to worry. The test was simple. They just needed to bring a crystal like the one she's holding and survive for 1 full month inside the Poison Dragon Mountain. Rangus went pale at the name while Zeke felt a sense of nostalgia. The Poison Dragon Mountain, he explained, was home to countless poisonous creatures. Even brushing against a single leaf could kill an ordinary human instantly. It was a region of pure danger. Zeke recalled how in his previous life, he had often used that place as his personal training ground. Still, he thought this test might be too cruel for young students. Freya explained the rules. Each student would receive 1 crystal orb. If their orb broke or was lost, they would immediately be disqualified. When someone nervously asked what happened to those disqualified, Freya replied bluntly, they would be expelled from the dragon's nest. She added that they didn't need to worry about the poison itself. If they properly used the dragon's breath-breathing technique, they would be fine. Leah pointed out that aside from poisonous plants, there were monsters there, too. Freya's eyes turned sharp as she said, they would need to defeat those monsters themselves, since that was the only way they could secure food. Without hunting, they wouldn't last even a few days. The students were horrified. Redden muttered that it was impossible. Many doubted whether their basic combat technique, the strike dragon, could even hurt the creatures living there. Freya smirked and told them not to panic. They had 5 days to prepare. During that time, they could each choose a basic weapon art from the Laragan family archives to learn. If they mastered it, their survival chances would improve. But if they failed to learn it within 5 days, she would not take responsibility for whatever happened in the mountain. One student asked timidly if Freya would help them in case things got too dangerous. Freya chuckled darkly, saying, "You're in the dragon's nest, the land of the Laragan family. Here the weak do not last. Only the strong survive. If you can't defeat a few monsters on your own, then you might as well sleep peacefully beside them in the bed of poison." The students trembled in terror, and sweat was dripping down their faces. Rangus was on the verge of tears, while Laika stayed silent, deep in thought. Zeke frowned to himself, wondering if this was still the same Laragan family he once knew. It felt so different from when he had been the family head. Freya then said that was all for now. She began distributing martial arts books for every weapon type and told them to step forward to pick whichever technique they wanted to learn. As students crowded around, Rangus hesitated, unsure of what to choose. Zeke advised him to take a spear technique, reminding him that he had used a spear during the entrance exam. Rangus quickly agreed and thanked him. Laika said she would pick a great sword technique since she already knew the lightning greatsword's basic forms. But Zeke stopped her, suggesting she try axe arts instead. Laika asked why, and Zeke explained that it would help cover her current weaknesses. Since it was Zeke who suggested it, she didn't argue and just nodded, quietly, trusting his words. Freya then asked if everyone had chosen their books. When they confirmed, she told them to make good use of the remaining 5 days. Survival depended entirely on mastering those techniques. If they failed to do so, they would die pathetically in the Poison Dragon Mountain. Just as she was about to leave, Freya suddenly remembered something and turned back. She warned them that during the test, their seniors would be trying to steal their crystal orbs. Rangus was stunned and asked what she meant. Freya explained that their 10-year-old senior group would also be taking the same test, but their task was to hunt down and steal the orbs from the younger batch. She added that the younger students outnumbered the seniors, and since the Poison Dragon Mountain was vast,